Jake DeBrusk is actually the very kind of player the Boston Bruins are looking for to round out their top six, but there's very little to zero chance of a reunion coming prior to the trade deadline.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Ian McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for nearly 20 years for various major outlets. Today is Thursday, February 26th, and the Boston Bruins are finally heading back to the ice tonight as a team. They will be taking on the Columbus Blue Jackets, a squad that is really hot on their tails when it comes to chasing the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. Although, maybe Columbus just takes out the Pittsburgh Penguins instead, who are going to be without Sidney Crosby for about 4 weeks. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the trade rumors, reports surrounding the Boston Bruins and a familiar name in Jake DeBrusk. We'll also discuss Jeremy Swayman being back at practice yesterday and what he was saying about winning the gold medal as well as the ensuing celebration. And we will preview tonight's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But let's begin with talk about Jake DeBrusk potentially coming back to the Boston Bruins. The NHL trade deadline is just next Friday, and there's rumors, rumblings out there about a possible reunion between the Bruins and the longtime Bruins forward. Context, the Bruins are holding on to that final wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference, and in the midst of a playoff push, they could make some additions to further bolster the lineup. And one area of clear need is a top six forward. You have Casey Mittelstadt, Pavel Zacha locking down the second line right now. They've got 1 year remaining on their respective contracts. Viktor Arvidsson as a bit of a placeholder on the right side, and they could really use a high-end scoring winger on the right side specifically to buffer David Pastrnak. Of course, is a left-hand shot. He has played both sides of the ice in the past. And according to Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period, the Bruins are one of the teams interested in Jake DeBrusk. The Vancouver Canucks are in the midst of a very down season. They've already started a bit Seattle Kraken, Detroit Red Wings are among the teams believed to have some interest in DeBrusk, who's now on the fourth period's latest trade watch list. Unclear as to the type of deal the Canucks are looking for in order to move DeBrusk, but GM Patrick Alvin and team president Jim Rutherford are willing to entertain calls, according to Pagnotta. Now, again, as with all trade report, to take them with at least a grain or two or perhaps several of salt. But let's just unpack this here real quick and see if it's even possible for this to happen. DeBrusk is in the second year of a 7-year, $38.5 million contract with the Canucks. So for the Bruins to bring him back, he would be under contract for the foreseeable future. If the Canucks are starting a retool, rebuild, DeBrusk could be dealt to recoup some strong assets. Of course, DeBrusk was a first-round pick of the Boston Bruins back in 2015. Spent 7 seasons in Boston from around 2017 until 2024. In his career with the Bruins, he had 465 games, 138 goals, 128 assists for 266 points. Never really quite broke out the way that we expected or wanted to. He was on the verge there of his first 30-goal season with the Bruins a couple years ago before getting injured after pulling off some heroics at 6 games. Those 28 points as a mix out of Boston's more productive player, but certainly not near the top of the list of scorers for the Bruins this season. David Pastrnak, 71, Geeky with 54, McAvoy, 39 points, Pavel Zacha, Elias Lindholm, each with 37. Fraser Minton even has more points than Jake DeBrusk does this season. Viktor Arvidsson, level at 28 points, which is exactly what DeBrusk has so far this season with the Vancouver Canucks. 13 goals, 15 assists in 57 games. Viktor Arvidsson has 28 points in 45 games. Casey Mittelstadt as well, 28 points in 47 games. Does this really make sense? Well, to some respect, it does. Like, the Bruins could use a guy who's got some speed, who's got some scoring abilities, and who can help out on the penalty kill, which is something that we saw from Jake DeBrusk in the past. He had a minute and a half average shorthanded ice time for the Bruins back in 2023-24. Didn't kill a lot of penalties last year for the Canucks, but he's back up to about 50 seconds of penalty killing ice time per game for that team. The Bruins penalty kill has been pretty bad this season, and they could certainly use him back on the wings to that end. The reason why this is unlikely to happen, though, is the nature of the contract that he signed with the Vancouver Canucks. He was an unrestricted free agent back in 2024, and the Bruins just let him walk for nothing. They didn't trade him prior to the deadline. They just let him, kind of considered him as an internal rental, and moved on in the offseason, allowing him to sign that 7-year deal with the Vancouver Canucks. Pretty reasonable cap hit, all things together. He has a 5.5 cap hit for, 5 more seasons after this one. He had 48 points in 82 games, 28 goals, which is a career high for him last season, one more than his previous career high set with the Bruins. But the thing is, he has a full no movement clause on his deal until the end of the 2026-27 season. And what exactly does that mean? Well, he cannot be traded, sent to the minors, or waived without player approval. Straight up. It's not as if he has a list of teams that he could go to without his approval. There's a straight no movement clause. He would have to be approached by the Canucks in order to be traded to anybody, and especially if he was going to be traded back to the Bruins. He and the Bruins had an opportunity to try to work out a deal back in 2024. Didn't come to fruition, but there, of course, was the very public trade request that he made. There was the rift, reportedly, with head coach Bruce Cassidy at the time. There were some pretty serious mental health struggles that he went through, especially in the COVID seasons, and some other off-ice issues that perhaps would keep him from wanting to return to Boston. Like, he very much signed in Vancouver for a reason. He wanted to be closer to home, which is Edmonton. And while he would fill a pretty specific need for the Boston Bruins, which is scoring winger, someone who can score, shoot, skate, as well as contribute on the penalty kill, I just don't see a reunion between these two sides, considering how contentious the last couple years of their relationship was. The last season was pretty good, actually. The vibes were pretty high. Of course, it was a very successful season for DeBrusk personally. Before he left, he had 19 goals, 21 assists in 40 games. The year before that, of course, the 2022-23 season, that record-breaking year for the Bruins, it was his best season, kind of relative to the games that he played. 27 goals, 50 points in only 67 games. Again, that season was cut short due to that injury suffered at the Winter Classic. I wasn't really keen on just letting him walk at the time. I do think he could fill a need for this team. I just don't see how his relationship with Don Sweeney, Cam Neely could have been mended in this time. Maybe fresh start with Marco Sturm behind the bench and some of those core guys moved out. He can come back as a more established Bruin. Look, he's a great guy off the ice by all accounts. Brings a lot of personability to the room. He's well liked in Vancouver, according to all reports. But if he's going to move in the second year of a 7-year contract that he signed, I find it hard to believe that he would be willing to come back to Boston that quickly. And I just don't see a lot of legs behind this particular rumor. The Bruins could be interested. They should be interested. He was a very valuable member of this team, especially later in his tenure where he became a more well-rounded forward. But based on the trade request, some of the stuff that happened while he was here, I just don't see it happening, and the Bruins will likely entertain options elsewhere. Well, maybe he's still in Vancouver. Maybe Connor Garland is a better fit than Jake DeBrusk. Tyler Myers was apparently going to be scratched. He's a right-hand shot defenseman. It all comes back to the question of, are the Bruins renters? Are they looking for more hockey deals to bring in guys with more control? But really, DeBrusk for Arvidsson at this time is a bit of a lateral move, and you don't need to give up any more who or sense on the DeBrusk situation. Coming up, we'll take a look at Jeremy Swayman coming back to practice and his reaction to winning gold, and we will preview tonight's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Have you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Well, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA Final for $2. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run into the playoffs or even sneak in, it's the perfect time to lock it in. Not only can your pick cash, but it can also send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Just use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. And thank you, number one podcast. We're offering an opportunity to jump into our Everydayer Club. What is this? Well, you get ad-free audio access to Locked On Boston Bruins, plus an invite to our group chat on Discord, which is really starting to pop off here as we get closer to the trade deadline. Use code DEADLINE ahead of the trade deadline for 1 month free of our Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonbruins.supercast.com or hit Jeremy Swayman was back at practice on Wednesday and looks as though he will not dress for tonight's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, he did practice, he did speak, but it looks as though he will not dress because he's still kind of getting back into form or up to speed following the Olympic break and the kind of ruckus afterwards. Now, Korpisalo is going to get the start. Michael DiPietro will be the backup, and Swayman will get a few more days to acclimate. He did return to Warrior for practice on Wednesday, and, he said it was incredible. The whole gold medal experience just starting to sink in. The reaction they've gotten from people in the U.S. the second they landed down, the outreach of family. It's a childhood dream come true. The group that we did it with, he said, especially the way we did it, beating Team Canada in overtime, an unbelievable feeling. And he, of course, was able to win alongside Bruins teammate Charlie McAvoy, 22 minutes and 45 seconds of ice time in the gold medal game. Wow, on the first pair. Basically saved a goal that was going in off Tom Wilson's stick, and they celebrated on the ice together, finally getting a chance to win as teammates, albeit not in black and gold. And Swayman described it as a full embrace, and that McAvoy is the most deserving on that team. The adversity that he's been through, refused to get knocked down, a leader for the American side. Obviously, his play spoke for itself. Tears coming down because, quote, "I'm just so proud of him and his accomplishments and the way that he handled himself and got that win." Huge factor for us in the championship game. He added he gets to see it firsthand, more than most of those guys on the team. What McAvoy does every day for the Bruins, for his family, for the community. Couldn't be more excited to share the medal with him forever. Both Swayman and McAvoy got back to Boston around 3, 4 a.m. on Wednesday. McAvoy was not at practice following that, while Swayman was. And McAvoy was back at practice here on Thursday, and Marco Sturm was going to discuss his availability for tonight's game following practice. Now, Swayman will be a spectator for this game tonight, and what wasn't in the story on the Bruins website was kind of the fallout from the phone call that was received in the locker room for Team USA, and Jeremy Swayman was asked about that on Wednesday. I believe it was Scott McLaughlin of WEEI who rightly asked him the question about the reaction to the quote-unquote joke about having to invite the women's team to the White House. And Swayman admitted that he and his teammates, several of whom laughed after the delivery of that quote-unquote joke, could have handled the moment better. He said, "We should have reacted differently. We know that we're so excited for the women's team, so much respect for the women's team, and to share that gold medal with them is something that we're forever grateful for." A lot of the observers found the reaction demeaning at best, some just completely disrespectful, a lot of kind of backtracking there. But it was nice to see that Swayman at least admitted that they could have and should have reacted in a different way. And, probably small consolation at this point, but at least he's acknowledging the fact that it was an improper reaction. Swayman said he's going to look to take lessons learned at the Olympics into the final stretch of the regular season for the Bruins. He did make 18 saves in his one start for Team USA, including that, one from center ice. But he's ready to return as the Bruins' number one guy. He said whenever his name is called, it's not going to be tonight, maybe the next game against the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday, he said, "I'll be ready to go." I was with the best players in the world every single day. The experience that he took from that was staying as focused as possible, being a professional in everything you do. Well, that's questionable after the end of the game, but performing on the ice at the biggest stage. The Bruins have a job to do over the next 6 weeks, he said. Being back in the building, he came after that late flight in from Washington where he and McAvoy attended the State of the Union, ate some McDonald's at the White House after touring and meeting with the president. And he can't wait to get started for a push for the playoffs. Well, he's going to have to wait because he will not be playing tonight in what's actually a pretty significant game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is a team that is right on Boston's heels. You could argue might have been more beneficial for the Bruins and for some of these guys to just party, come back to their respective teams, and be ready to go. Joonas Korpisalo has been playing pretty well prior to the break, so hopefully he can step up as a bronze medal winner and get the win for the Boston Bruins against Zach Werenski, fellow gold medal winner, and the Columbus Blue Jackets, so that the Bruins can secure this big 2 points. That is a game that we will preview here as the podcast continues. Keep an eye out also for Charlie McAvoy's reaction to the Team USA celebration. If he's asked about that, I hope he is as well. But at least good for Swayman for acknowledging that, they could have and should have handled that a little bit better. That's like the understatement of the year. Anyways, coming up, a preview of tonight's game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing. The one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. If you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed-sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. Just go to indeed.com/podcast right now. That's indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, after a few weeks off, the Bruins are finally back in action tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And these Blue Jackets, if you don't remember, are red hot coming into this one. They had a coaching change earlier this season where they let go of Dean Evison and brought in Rick Bowness, who is a veteran head coach who's been around the block several times as an NHL head coach, including with our very own Boston Bruins. He was the head coach of the Maine Mariners, then the Bruins AHL affiliate back in 89-90, and then he was the Bruins head coach for the 91-92 season, and has since gone on to coach with the Ottawa Senators, New York Islanders, Dallas Stars, Winnipeg Jets. Only had the one season in Boston, 36 wins, 32 losses, and 12 ties. They finished second in the division that year. And just after one season, wasn't brought back though, and the Bruins replaced him with Brian Sutter. Bowness went on to become the first head coach of the Ottawa Senators when they first joined the league. Anyways, prior to the break, the Blue Jackets were 9-1-0 over their past 10 games, including 7 wins in a row. Games against Dallas, Tampa, kind of fell off from there, the level of opposition, but still one of the best teams in the new year here in the NHL. And over their past 5 games, you're never going to guess who leads them in scoring. It's our old friend Charlie Coyle, who's got 4 goals, 9 points over Columbus's last 5 games. Zach Werenski in there with 6 assists as well for the Bruins. It was David Pastrnak with 7 points over the past 5 games. Morgan Geekie with 4 goals, Pastrnak with 6 assists. It's actually the first of 3 meetings between these two teams this season. They'll play again on March 29th and April 12th. And the Blue Jackets right now are only 4 points behind the Bruins in the race for a playoff spot. Now, here's what you need to know, though. The Blue Jackets are currently 9th in the Eastern Conference in point percentage. They're 10th in points behind Washington, but they have 4 games capital. the thing is, the Pittsburgh Penguins currently sit second in the Metropolitan Division, 5 points up on the Blue Jackets with same amount of games played. But as we all know, Sidney Crosby is going to be out for several weeks after that injury suffered at the Olympics. 3 Metropolitan teams make the playoffs automatically. So if Columbus can overtake the Islanders or the Penguins, then it becomes one of those 2 teams that the Bruins are fighting for in terms of a wild card spot. Right now, the Bruins are, 4 points up, 3 points back of Detroit. They were overtaken for third in the Atlantic last night after a Buffalo Sabres win. And the Bruins, again, 69 points. They're 2 ahead of the Capitals with 3 games in hand, 4 ahead of the Blue Jackets with 1 more game played. The Blue Jackets have the 18th ranked power play, 19.7% success rate. The Bruins are third, 26.3. Penalty kill wise, the Bruins rank 27th area of clear improvement. 20% success rate. These teams rank 7th and 10th respectively when it comes to face-off percentage. The Bruins have a better overall team offense. They're 6th in the NHL at 3.39, although yesterday we talked about how their expected goals are kind of their actual in terms of as both teams are allowing 3.14 goals per game each. So the Bruins have a slightly better offense. The Blue Jackets are having slightly more goals. They are the opportunity for the Bruins to come in. I assume that Jet Greaves will get the start for the Blue Jackets, 18-12-6 with a 910 save percentage. It's going to be Jonas Korpisalo for our Bruins, 8-2 with an 893 save percentage, although that has been significantly higher over the last several weeks. Columbus led in scoring by Kirill Marchenko, who's got 40. Resurgence for Charlie. They've got a lot of young and added veterans in Boone, Mason Marchment. On the back end, Zach Werenski, of course, one of the best in the NHL. So this is going to be a pretty big game for the Bruins. If they can create some separation between themselves and the Blue Jackets, they'll be in that much better position to qualify for the playoffs. If you look at different models, there's different views as to what the Bruins' chances are of making the playoffs. You have The Athletic, who is not as high as, say, Money Puck, but with a win tonight, that can really, in order to secure a wild card spot, or maybe even continue to ride in top 3 spots, although that's kind of a long shot based on the way some of these guys are, some of these teams are playing right now. Anyways, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. We'll be back tomorrow to bring you all the latest on the black and gold, to recap whatever happens tonight. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please podcast feed on YouTube so that you never miss a thing. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram. And please continue the club audio feed as well as a invite to our Discord server where we're going to be pumping up the trade deadline and all that is to come. Episode of Locked On Bruins.